Have you ever wondered what lurks beneath the surface of a man's polished exterior, hidden in the crevices of his unspoken thoughts? Deep within the shadow, as Carl Jung would name it, lies a realm of forbidden desires, cravings so raw, so primal, that they are buried beneath layers of ego, shame, and societal masks. These are not the fleeting wants of the conscious mind, but the silent yearnings of the soul, clawing at the edges of his being, desperate for release. To understand these desires is to wield a power few women grasp, a power that unveils the mysteries of male psychology and reveals the dance between masculine restraint and feminine allure. This is not about manipulation, but about seeing, truly seeing, the unspoken forces that drive him, and in that seeing, discovering the untamed strength within the feminine spirit. In the Jungian shadow, a man harbors desires he dares not name, not even to himself. The shadow, as Jung taught, is the repository of all that is denied, the instincts, the fears, the hungers that society deems unacceptable. For men, these desires are often tied to the eternal feminine, the anima, that archetype of mystery and emotional depth that both terrifies and captivates. The first of these forbidden desires is the longing for surrender. Not the surrender of power, but the surrender to vulnerability, to be seen in his raw, unfiltered truth by a woman who does not flinch. He craves a feminine presence so potent, so grounded in her own strength, that he can lay down his armor without fear of judgment. Yet, this desire is forbidden because it clashes with the stoic mask he wears, forged in the fires of expectation. Expectation Seneca might have called the chains of external validation, binding him to a performance of unyielding strength. Imagine, for a moment, a man standing at the edge of his own abyss, staring into the depths of his shadow. He yearns to be known, to be unraveled, but the ego resists. The ego, that false self Marcus Aurelius warned against, whispers that vulnerability is weakness, that to reveal his heart is to risk annihilation. And yet, the feminine spirit, in her quiet power, can pierce this illusion. When a woman embodies her own individuation, her journey toward wholeness, as Jung described, she becomes a mirror, reflecting his hidden desires back to him. She does not chase, nor does she plead. She simply exists, radiant in her self-possession, and in that presence, he feels the pull of his second forbidden desire, to be consumed by passion without control. This is not mere lust, but a deeper hunger, a desire to lose himself in the chaos of feeling, to be swept away by a force greater than his carefully constructed identity. But what happens when you, the woman watching this, step into that power? When you refuse to shrink, to dim your light to make him comfortable? The moment you embrace your own shadow, the parts of you deemed too wild, too intense, you awaken something in him. You become the embodiment of the divine feminine, the archetype that Jung saw as both creator and destroyer. This is the third forbidden desire, the craving for a woman who is unafraid of her own depth. He is drawn to the mystery in you, the untamed energy that dances between tenderness and ferocity. Yet, this desire terrifies him, for it demands he confront his own inadequacies, his own unhealed wounds. As Epictetus taught, true freedom lies in mastering what is within one's control, and for a man, this means facing the shadow rather than fleeing from it. The fourth desire emerges from this confrontation, the longing for absolution. Deep within, he carries the weight of his failures, regrets, betrayals, moments of cowardice. He seeks a woman whose presence is a balm, not through forgiveness, but through acceptance. This is not about excusing his flaws, but about witnessing them without recoil. A woman who has done her own shadow work, who has faced her own darkness, becomes a beacon for this desire. She does not need to fix him. Her mere existence, steady and unyielding, offers a space where he can begin to forgive himself. But this desire is forbidden because it requires him to admit his imperfections, to step out from behind the facade of invincibility. And you, watching this, what does this stir in you? Do you feel the weight of your own power, the way your presence can shift the tides of his soul? The fifth desire is the yearning for transcendence, to connect with something beyond the mundane, through the feminine. Jung spoke of the anima as the bridge to the divine, and in her spiritual depth, a woman can evoke this longing. He seeks not just love but a sacred union, a merging of souls that lifts him beyond his earthly constraints. Yet, this desire is buried, forbidden by a world that demands practicality over poetry. This sacred yearning for transcendence, buried deep in the male shadow, is not a mere romantic fantasy, but a primal ache for connection to the eternal. Carl Jung saw the anima as the feminine within, a guide to the soul's deeper truths. And when a man encounters a woman who embodies this archetype, his fifth forbidden desire surges forth. He longs to be touched by the divine through her, to glimpse the infinite in her eyes, her silence, her untamed spirit. Yet, this desire is dangerous, for it demands he relinquish control, that he surrender to a force he cannot dominate or define. Society, with its rigid scripts of masculinity, chains him to the material, status, power, conquest, leaving little room for this spiritual hunger. Seneca might have warned him to seek only what aligns with nature, but the nature of this desire is wild, untethered, and terrifyingly vast. A woman who walks in her own truth, who has wrestled with her shadow and emerged whole, becomes a living invitation to this transcendence. Her presence alone stirs the question, what if he could let go just for a moment and fall into the mystery? But this is where the dance becomes perilous. The sixth forbidden desire is the craving for destruction, not of the woman, but of himself. In the Jungian shadow, destruction and creation are two sides of the same coin. He yearns to be undone, to have his ego shattered by a woman whose strength mirrors his own hidden depths. This is not about masochism, but about rebirth. He seeks a feminine force so potent that it dismantles the walls he's built, forcing him to face the raw, unpolished truth of who he is. A woman who embodies this power does not coddle or console. She challenges, her silence a blade that cuts through his defenses. Marcus Aurelius spoke of embracing the present moment, of accepting life's impermanence, and this desire aligns with that stoic truth. To be destroyed by her is to be reborn, but the ego resists, clinging to its illusions of permanence and control. And you, standing in your own power, do you sense the weight of this? When you refuse to shrink, when you let your spiritual femininity radiate without apology, you become the catalyst for his unraveling. You are not here to save him, that is his work, his individuation, but your presence can awaken the possibility. The seventh and final forbidden desire is the longing for eternal return, the wish to relive the moment of connection with the feminine divine again and again. This is not nostalgia, but a deeper ache, a desire to circle back to the instant when he first felt truly seen, truly alive in her presence. Jung might call this the eternal recurrence of the anima, a pull toward the archetype that haunts his dreams. Yet, this desire is forbidden because it defies time, defies the linear march of life. It asks him to dwell in the liminal, to embrace the cyclical nature of existence rather than the forward thrust of achievement. This dance between the masculine and feminine is not a game of power, but a sacred interplay of shadows. Each of these desires, surrender, passion, depth, absolution, transcendence, destruction, and eternal return, lives in the male psyche, hidden behind the mask of stoicism or bravado. A woman who has done her own shadow work, who has faced her fears and integrated her darkness, becomes a mirror for these desires. She does not need to chase or manipulate. Her mere existence, rooted in self-worth and spiritual clarity, draws them forth. Epictetus would remind us that true power lies in mastering what is within our control, our own minds, our own hearts. For a woman, this means cultivating her inner strength, her divine feminine, not to wield it as a weapon, but to let it flow like a river, steady and unstoppable. Consider, for a moment, what it means to embody this energy. When you walk in your truth, when you let go of the need for external validation, you become a force that cannot be ignored. You are not here to fix a man's shadow or to carry his burdens. You are here to live fully in your own light, to dance with your own darkness, and in doing so, you awaken his. This is not about control, but about presence. A woman who knows her worth does not beg for attention. She commands it effortlessly, not through force, but through the quiet power of her being. The man who encounters this energy cannot help but feel the pull of his own forbidden desires, stirring in the depths of his shadow, longing to be seen, to be known, to be transformed, to be reborn. This awakening, this stirring of forbidden desires within the male shadow, is not a simple unraveling but a confrontation with the eternal. A woman who embodies her divine feminine, who has walked through the fire of her own shadow work, becomes a living paradox, both a sanctuary and a storm. She does not need to demand his attention. Her presence alone, rooted in the depths of her individuation, pulls him toward the edge of his own abyss. Jung spoke of the anima as the feminine soul within a man, a guide to his unconscious. But when he encounters a woman who lives in her truth, she becomes more than a projection. She becomes a catalyst. The desires buried in his shadow, surrender, passion, depth, absolution, transcendence, destruction, and eternal return, begin to pulse, demanding acknowledgement. Yet, these are not desires he can easily name, for they are bound by the chains of societal expectation. The Stoic mask Seneca might call a betrayal of one's true nature. The interplay between masculine and feminine is a dance of mirrors, each reflecting the other's hidden truths. When a woman embraces her spiritual femininity, she does not merely attract. She disrupts. Her silence, her detachment, her refusal to chase, these are not acts of manipulation, but of authenticity. They are the natural outflow of a soul that has faced its own darkness and emerged whole. This is the power of the feminine archetype, what Jung might call the great mother or the wise woman, who holds both creation and destruction in her hands. A man feels this instinctively, though he may not understand it. His shadow stirs because she is unafraid of hers, and in that fearless presence, he glimpses the possibility of his own liberation. Marcus Aurelius would remind him to focus only on what is within his control. But the paradox is that her presence makes him question what control even means. Consider the weight of this, you who watch and listen. When you step into your own power, when you let go of the need to be seen or validated by another, you become a force that reshapes the air around you. The man who encounters this energy feels the pull of his forbidden desires not because you have orchestrated it, but because you have become a living embodiment of what he secretly craves. His longing for surrender is not about weakness, but about trust. His hunger for passion is not about conquest, but about losing himself in the fire of connection. His desire for depth seeks a woman who does not shy away from her own complexity, and his need for absolution craves a presence that witnesses without judgment. These are not demands you must meet, but truths you can reflect simply by being whole. The sixth desire, the craving for destruction, is perhaps the most misunderstood. It is not about harm, but about transformation. A man longs to be broken open, to have his ego, the false self Epictetus warned against, shattered by a woman who is unafraid of her own power. This is not about cruelty, but about truth. When you stand in your strength, when you refuse to dim your light to make him comfortable, you become the blade that cuts through his illusions. He may resist, he may retreat, but deep within, he feels the pull of rebirth. This is the alchemy of the feminine, the ability to hold both tenderness and ferocity, to be both the haven and the storm. A woman who has integrated her shadow does not need to force this. It flows from her naturally, like a river carving through stone. And the seventh desire, the eternal return, is the ache to relive the moment of connection, to circle back to the instant when he felt truly alive in her presence. This is not a clinging to the past, but a longing for the timeless, for the sacred moment when the masculine and feminine meet in perfect harmony. Jung saw this as the eternal dance of archetypes, the anima and animus weaving together in the psyche. For a man, This desire is forbidden because it defies the forward march of time, the societal push toward productivity and progress. Yet, in the presence of a woman who embodies her spiritual depth, he feels the pull of the eternal, the possibility of a connection that transcends the mundane. You, who carry this feminine energy, know this. Your power lies not in chasing or controlling, but in being. When you walk in your truth, when you embrace your own shadow and let your light shine unapologetically, you become a mirror for his deepest desires. You awaken in him the courage to face his own darkness, to step into the fire of his own transformation. This is not about fixing him or bending him to your will. It is about living so fully in your own essence that he cannot help but see himself more clearly. This mirror you hold, this radiant embodiment of the divine feminine, does not merely reflect a man's shadow, it illuminates it. The 7 forbidden desires, surrender, passion, depth, absolution, transcendence, destruction, and eternal return, are not mere wants but primal currents that flow beneath the surface of his conscious mind. Jung taught that the shadow is not to be feared but integrated, for within it lies the raw material of transformation. A woman who has walked the path of her own individuation, who has faced her own darkness and emerged with clarity, becomes a beacon for this integration. She does not coax or cajole. She simply exists, her presence a quiet challenge to his defenses. In her silence, in her refusal to shrink, she stirs the masculine psyche, awakening desires he has long buried under layers of ego and expectation. The masculine ego, as Seneca might describe, is a fortress built to withstand vulnerability. It thrives on control, on the illusion of invincibility, but the feminine spirit in its untamed authenticity undermines this illusion. When you stand in your power, when you let your spiritual femininity radiate without apology, you become a force that cannot be contained. This is not about seduction in the shallow sense, but about a deeper alchemy, a meeting of souls that transcends the physical. The man who encounters this energy feels the weight of his own shadow, the desires he has suppressed for fear of losing himself. His longing for surrender asks for a safe haven, but it also demands courage to lay down the mask and reveal the man beneath. His craving for passion is not a call for fleeting pleasure, but a hunger for a connection that consumes him entirely, leaving no part of his soul untouched. And what of you, the woman who carries this fire? Do you feel the strength that courses through you when you release the need to be seen, to be chosen? The feminine power lies in its paradox. It is soft yet unyielding, gentle yet fierce. When you embrace your own complexity, when you refuse to dim your light to fit his expectations, you become the embodiment of the anima, the archetype that Jung saw as both muse and mystery. This is the essence of the 3rd desire, the craving for depth. A man yearns for a woman who is not afraid to dive into the abyss of her own soul, for in her courage, he finds permission to explore his own. Your authenticity becomes a mirror, reflecting back his hidden truths, his unspoken fears, his unacknowledged longings. The 4th desire, absolution, is not about forgiveness in the traditional sense but about acceptance. He seeks a presence that witnesses his flaws without turning away, a woman whose strength allows her to hold space for his humanity. This is not about coddling or excusing his failures, but about seeing them clearly, without judgment. A woman who has done her own shadow work, who has faced her own regrets and emerged with compassion, becomes a sanctuary for this desire. She does not need to fix him. Her mere existence, grounded in her own truth, offers a space where he can begin to heal. Epictetus would remind us that true freedom lies in focusing on what is within our control. And for you, this means cultivating your own inner peace, your own unshakable core. The 5th desire, transcendence, is perhaps the most sacred. It is the longing to touch the divine through the feminine, to connect with something greater than the self. When you live in alignment with your spiritual depth, when you let your soul shine without fear, you become a bridge to this transcendence. He feels it not as a demand, but as an invitation, a call to rise above the mundane and touch the eternal. This desire is forbidden because it asks him to let go of the material, to release the need for control and embrace the unknown. Yet, in your presence, he senses the possibility of something greater, something that lifts him beyond the confines of his ego. The sixth desire, destruction, is the shadow's cry for rebirth. He longs to be broken open, to have his illusions shattered by a woman whose strength is both tender and unrelenting. This is not about pain, but about transformation, the kind Marcus Aurelius might have described as the art of living in alignment with nature. When you stand in your truth, when you refuse to bend to his insecurities, you become the catalyst for this destruction, not out of cruelty, but out of love for what is real. And the seventh desire, eternal return, is the ache to relive the moment when he felt truly alive in your presence, to return to the sacred space where masculine and feminine meet in perfect harmony. This sacred space, where the masculine and feminine converge, is not a fleeting moment but a timeless encounter, a collision of shadows and light that reverberates through the soul. The seven forbidden desires, surrender, passion, depth, absolution, transcendence, destruction, and eternal return, pulse within the male psyche, buried beneath layers of conditioning and fear. Jung taught that the shadow is not an enemy, but a teacher, a repository of truths too raw to face in the light of day. A woman who has embraced her own shadow, who has walked through the fire of her fears and emerged whole, becomes a living invitation for a man to confront his own. Her presence is not a demand, but a quiet revolution, a call to unravel the masks he wears and step into the truth of who he is. This is the power of the divine feminine, the archetype that holds both creation and destruction, tenderness and strength in perfect balance. When you, the woman who carries this energy, stand unapologetically in your truth, you become a force that disrupts the illusion of control. You do not need to chase or plead. Your authenticity alone is enough to stir the depths of his being. The desire for surrender, the first of the forbidden, is not about weakness, but about trust, a trust he rarely allows himself to feel. In your presence, he senses the possibility of letting go, of laying down the weight of his ego. But this requires courage, for as Seneca taught, true strength lies in aligning with nature, not in clinging to false securities. Your refusal to dim your light, to shrink for his comfort, becomes a mirror that reflects his own longing for freedom. The second desire, passion, burns with an intensity that frightens him. It is not mere physical desire, but a craving to be consumed, to lose himself in a connection that transcends the ordinary. When you embody your spiritual femininity, when you let your soul radiate without fear, you awaken this hunger. He feels it not as a demand, but as a pull, a magnetic force that draws him toward the fire of your being. And yet, this desire is forbidden because it asks him to relinquish control, to surrender to the chaos of feeling. Marcus Aurelius might remind him to embrace the present moment, to let go of resistance, but the ego clings tightly, afraid of being swept away. The third desire, depth, is a yearning for a woman who is unafraid of her own complexity. You, who have faced your own shadow, who have integrated your darkness and light, become a beacon for this longing. Your authenticity, your refusal to perform or placate, challenges him to confront his own depths. He craves a connection that is not surface level, but soul deep, a meeting of minds and hearts that pierces through the mundane. This is where the feminine power lies, not in manipulation, but in truth. When you live fully in your essence, you become a mirror for his own unacknowledged truths, his hidden desires, his unspoken fears. The fourth desire, absolution, seeks a presence that sees without judging, that holds space for his humanity without recoil. This is not about fixing him, but about witnessing him, flaws and all. A woman who has done her own shadow work, who has faced her own regrets and emerged with compassion, becomes a sanctuary for this desire. Your strength, your quiet confidence, offers a space where he can begin to forgive himself, to release the burdens he carries. Epictetus would remind us that true freedom lies in mastering what is within our control, and for you, This means cultivating your own inner peace, your own unshakable core. The fifth desire, transcendence, is the ache to touch the divine through the feminine. When you live in alignment with your spiritual depth, you become a bridge to the eternal, a reminder of what lies beyond the material. The sixth desire, destruction, is the longing to be broken open, to have the ego shattered by a woman whose strength is both tender and unrelenting. And the seventh, eternal return, is the wish to relive the moment of connection, to return to the sacred space where he felt truly alive. In your presence, these desires are not demands but possibilities, awakened by the simple act of you being whole. This is your power, you who watch and listen. When you embrace your own shadow, when you let your light shine without apology, you become a catalyst for transformation, not just for him, but for yourself. You are not here to chase or control, but to live so fully in your truth that the world shifts around you. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses,